I still remember the exact moment when the story of Hans Rider punched through my certainty about what it really means to prosper. It was late, the kind of night that muffles the world and sharpens your thoughts. I'd been wrestling with my own doubts about money, ambition, and whether my choices were truly aligned with what I valued. I stumbled across a yellowed, half-forgotten journal in my grandfather's library, one of those treasures you find when you're not searching for it. There, amid crumbling pages, were references to Hans Rider, the infamous industrialist, a man whose name was whispered in warnings, not in praise. My grandfather wrote about how Hans Rider didn't see sides, only opportunities. He sold arms to anyone who would pay, the Axis and the Allies both, while families like mine hid in darkness, praying for the world not to unravel. Hans grew richer with every battle, his coffers swelling even as cities burned. Yet beneath the cold efficiency and unending calculation, there was a feverish restlessness, the kind that gnaws from the inside. I found myself torn between a sick sort of awe, how clever he must have been, how bold, and a surging anger at his indifference. But then came the passage that shocked me awake. Hans Rider's empire didn't just crumble. It was torn apart, sanctions, exile, a notoriety that shadowed him until his last breath. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that Hans's story was more than a tale of greed. It was a mirror. I've seen so many people, and felt myself, at times, reach for those quick wins, the easy shortcuts, the deals you make with shadows when you think no one is looking. There's a moment of triumph, a pocket full of cash, and then suddenly, like Hans, you're left with emptiness that money can't fill. I wonder how many of us are haunted by our own bargains, choices made from fear or impatience, chasing a version of success that always seems to slip through our fingers. When I ask people what keeps them from lasting financial prosperity, the answers tumble out. Fear of missing out, the pressure to make it fast, doubt that we're worthy of abundance unless we play someone else's game. I felt those fears. In the quiet corners of my mind, I hear echoes of Hans. Take what you can, while you can. But then I remember my grandfather's trembling script, the way he underlined certain lines more fiercely than others. Real wealth, he wrote, is in building what lasts, not in selling yourself to the highest bidder. We inherit more than just assets from those who came before us. We inherit stories. Some are warnings dressed as opportunities. Others are compasses that keep us true even when the path looks dark. The drama of money, the triumphs, the collapses, the risks and regrets, plays out in every generation. Sometimes, we convince ourselves that we're different, that we'll be smarter, faster, immune to the temptations that brought others down. But I realized, listening to my own doubts and desires, that the real battle isn't out there, or in the numbers on a page, but inside us. My journey was just beginning. Tonight, as I share this story with you, I invite you to pause and let its weight settle. Have you ever chased after opportunities, ignoring the cost? Have you ever wondered if your pursuit of more is secretly leaving you with less? Of yourself, your peace, your future? I have, and I know the pull is real. But I also believe, with all my heart, that we can learn differently. We can shape new stories, ones grounded in integrity, purpose, and a quiet power that endures far longer than any fleeting windfall. So, if you're ready to look beneath the surface of numbers and really face what stands between you and lasting prosperity, I invite you to come with me. This is not just about money. It's about who we become in its pursuit. The journey ahead will take us through uncomfortable truths, personal reckonings, and the exhilarating possibility of claiming abundance without losing ourselves. Let's begin, together. When I was in my late 20s, I spent a summer in the old quarter of Delft, working as an apprentice for an eccentric clockmaker named Willem. He believed a man's relationship with wealth mirrored the inner gears of his favorite inventions. Most people, he'd whisper to me over the tick and hum of brass, inherited rusty cogs without ever realizing it. You can polish the outside all you want, he'd say, eyes glinting. But if the springs are warped from the start, you'll never measure time right, let alone fortune. His workshop was cluttered with curiosities, battered ledgers from centuries past, a faded family crest above the fireplace, the sharp tang of metal filings in the air. Customers streamed in, merchants, scholars, teachers, students. Many confided in him over the counters, thinking they'd come for their clocks, but slowly unraveling stories that hinged on something much deeper. A shopkeeper, whose father tucked savings in cookie tins and muttered that coins were for hoarding, admitted she still picked up every penny in the street, heart pounding as though each one proved she was worth keeping. A young student, desperate for scholarships, confessed he couldn't ask for fair payment at his job. "It just feels wrong," he whispered. "Like I'm not supposed to ask." One evening, as the city bells tolled, Willem handed me an old, leather-bound notebook. "Turn these pages," he said quietly, "and you'll trace your own roots." Inside were stories not only from his ancestors, but from families who had walked through his doors, tales marked by secrecy, silence, even bitter rivalry over inheritances. Page after page revealed patterns. An aunt who gambled away 3 generations' savings because she believed she'd always lose anyway. A cousin who, after years of hearing his parents warn rich people are cold, hid his financial blessings so well he could scarcely enjoy them. It was as though scarcity and unease had seeped through their bloodlines, shaping choices and self-image without a word spoken aloud. Looking back, these revelations hit me like cold water. Our beliefs about earning, holding, even deserving resources rarely start with us. They are bequeathed, sometimes gently, sometimes in panicked whispers, often through stories retold at kitchen tables or warnings lobbed during hardship. I grew to sense my own inheritance, too. My father's constant anxiety over bills, my mother's gentle refrain that just enough was safer than reaching too high and failing. Even our silences carved grooves in my sense of possibility. The hush when certain topics surfaced, the way envy flickered in glances when a neighbor bought a new car. During those evenings in the workshop, I began cataloging my own internal ledgers, memories that tugged at my reactions each time opportunity knocked or risk loomed. I noticed how my chest tightened at the thought of negotiation, how a simple compliment about my work's worth could send pangs of guilt ripple through me. When a friend suggested investment, my gut recalled my uncle's scorn for fancy stock games. Each emotion, each gut reaction, felt less like a choice and more like a legacy unwinding itself, gear by inherited gear. Illuminated by candlelight, Willem broke the silence one rainy night with a gentle, piercing question: "Whose rules are you playing by?" I couldn't answer immediately. Nobody had ever shown me how deep those old scripts ran, scribbled by voices I barely remembered. Just as those ancient clocks carried marks of every craftsman who'd repaired or neglected them, I began recognizing how my habits and outlook had been engineered long before I made my own decisions. As I returned home that summer, walking those cobblestone streets one last time, it became clear that reprogramming my relationship with fortune would mean excavating layers I didn't even know existed. Not to place blame on those who came before, but to lift the curtain and see clearly. So the next movement wasn't merely a repetition, but a conscious choice. Each realization opened a new question. What have I accepted as normal that may be hiding possibility just out of sight? And perhaps, even more urgently, what stories might I pass along if I don't pause, examine, and choose again? Years after that summer among clock faces and candlelight, I found myself facing a storm of rumors in a bustling, modern office off Franklin Street. The stakes were different now. No tick of ancient gears, no shelves of secrets, just sleek laptops, the scent of burnt coffee, and a crew of hungry analysts chasing their next spark. I was tasked with leading a new project rumored to transform the company's fortune. The catch? Our biggest backer was infamous for cutting ties and shifting blame when numbers soured. The office bristled with uncertainty. One rainy Thursday, I huddled with my team at a greasy diner over chipped mugs of black coffee. The thunderstorm outside made the windows quiver. Drew, always skeptical, blurted out, "What if we're just building another house of cards? What if it all folds because our foundation's rotten?" The discomfort in his voice caught me off guard, a blend of realism and cynicism that felt all too familiar in places of high ambition. The unease in that booth brought me to an unexpected crossroads. Peering over scattered notes, I realized how often we let certain assumptions run wild in the shadows of our decisions, never questioning if they're accurate. In those moments, beliefs can become cages, locking us into stories about what is possible or permitted. For instance, Tess, our youngest analyst, came from a family who spent every dollar out of fear the next wouldn't come. To her, saving felt risky, not secure. She pushed for short-term wins, hesitant to invest in anything that didn't promise instant payoff. As the days passed and the pressure intensified, I started to hear echoes of these subtle myths masked as facts. The only way to get ahead is to sacrifice everything. Success means someone else must lose. Wealth is corrupting, unless you're struggling for it. Every discussion seemed laced with these quiet rulers. Yet, just as weeds can choke a promising garden if left unchecked, holding tight to these convictions quietly sabotaged our efforts. To challenge these ingrained stories, I began introducing a new dynamic to our meetings, a single question written boldly on the whiteboard. But what if that's not true? At first, the suggestion met with blank stares and awkward laughter. Gradually, however, something shifted. Dylan, usually reserved, voiced an idea. Maybe the risk isn't in waiting, but in never backing ourselves to think bigger than panic allows. That single sentence sparked a wave of reconsideration. No longer trading in only fear or assumption, we started flipping negative certainties on their heads. Nothing transformed overnight. Yet, every time we chose to replace restriction with possibility, our decision-making sharpened. Instead of hoarding resources nervously, we developed a model where pilot projects could gently test new ideas, embracing small risks for larger learning. This grounded optimism began to ripple outwards. Our results improved, sure, not just on paper, but in morale, in partnership, in the climate of our conversations. The project grew not on a bed of bargains and self-doubt, but on the realization that the stories we choose to believe or challenge shape not only outcomes, but the quality of our everyday experience. Looking back, I see that the real breakthrough wasn't technological, but psychological. The smallest shift in belief, shared among a community, can unlock new possibilities as surely as muscle memory powers a pianist's fingers. Transforming automatic narratives into open questions made courage a habit and creativity a reflex. That dining booth, once a crucible of anxiety, became a wellspring of invention. Now, whenever I sense an internal script whispering scarcity or suspicion, I reach for the question that changed our project's fate. I offer it to you. What if the so-called rules are only stories waiting to be rewritten? If you approach them with curiosity and conviction? The fog had settled thick that December morning as I crossed the city park, hands stuffed in my jacket, wrestling with a peculiar sense of restlessness. I'd spent weeks pushing numbers in soulless spreadsheets, mapping out a 30-year plan that promised steady gains but offered no spark. In the world I inhabited, quick victories were flashed like neon lights, friends boasting about crypto windfalls and speculative investments, each story sharper and more dazzling than the last. Their phones buzzed with updates, the constant thrill of one more win etched into the lines beneath their eyes. Yet, even at the parties and networking brunches, triumph felt brittle, as if fortune could shatter with a single missed step. Midway through the park, I ran into Joel, a former classmate turned serial entrepreneur. Shaggy-haired and always late, he'd once nearly gone bankrupt on a fruitless tech gamble, only to resurface a year later with a humble bakery at the city's edge. Despite having fewer zeros in his bank balance than many in our alumni group, he radiated a steadiness I'd never managed to grasp. As we lingered by a frost-coated bench, his breath formed small clouds, and his voice was low but firm. I used to chase the fastest return, he mused, but all I found was exhaustion, money slipping away quicker than I could spend it. Building something people trusted changed everything. Success found me when I stopped clawing at shortcuts and put roots down instead. His words ignited something in me I hadn't expected, envy, not of his profits, but of his quiet certainty. What struck me most wasn't the different scale of his ventures. It was the way his everyday choices became the architecture for something enduring. Instead of grasping at fleeting opportunities, Joel invested in connections, with customers, with employees, with the surrounding community. When an economic downturn hit, his bakery became the anchor for neighbors newly out of work, not just another casualty. He didn't obsess over maximizing every dollar, but about creating a business people believed in and relied upon. Each morning, he arrived before sunrise, rolling dough while listening to people's stories, discovering that prosperity takes on new meaning when it's woven through collaboration and care rather than isolation and frenzy. This model didn't produce headlines, but it withstood storms that toppled flashier upstarts. Furthermore, Joel's approach hammered home an uncomfortable truth I'd avoided. My own impulse to win quickly mirrored deeper anxiety, a need for certainty in a world that rarely guaranteed it. Watching him, I realized lasting gain was less about outpacing others and more about identifying values worth nurturing. His story reframed wealth for me not as a finish line to be crossed, but as a garden tended through patience and daily acts of integrity, cultivated, revisited, even rebuilt after setbacks. Shifting my own rhythm proved difficult at first. I began by scrutinizing my daily habits, where I rushed, what I avoided, and the shallow wins I lifted above genuine progress. I started volunteering at a local mentorship program, not for networking or leverage, but simply to connect and offer guidance. In return, I gained insight I could never have engineered, wisdom from retirees, fresh perspectives from ambitious teens. These relationships became sources of both stability and innovation, rich in ways that quarterly reports never measured. Eventually, I noticed a ripple effect. As I focused on gradual improvement and meaningful collaboration, opportunities appeared that aligned with my principles instead of pulling me in a dozen hollow directions. There was no spectacular windfall, no single victorious moment. Instead, there was growth that felt honest, solid, and worthy of being shared. Looking back, the feverish urge to win at any cost faded, replaced by a deeper kind of satisfaction. True prosperity, I found, emerges when each decision becomes a step towards something built to last, not only in the marketplace, but within oneself. Stepping onto the bustling avenue as morning traffic hummed past me, I could sense a different kind of momentum in the air. I'd arranged to meet Lorraine, an old colleague with a reputation for transforming chaos into opportunity, at a corner cafe known for its mismatched furniture and soulful jazz drifting through the open doorway. As we settled into a booth by the window, I watched sunlight flicker across her hands, nimble and expressive, as she recounted the wild pivot she'd made after leaving her corporate job. She leaned in, her voice carrying an urgency that tugged at my attention. "You know, I used to think building wealth meant finding the perfect formula. Tick the right boxes, play by everyone else's rules, and maybe get lucky. But life, it turns out, is a Messier architect." When I finally set aside the rigid plans, I stumbled into a side project that grew roots in ways I couldn't have charted ahead of time. She laughed, loosening a memory that was equal parts amusement and hard-earned lesson. I started hosting donut pop-ups of all things. The surprising part wasn't the extra cash. It was how it challenged my assumptions about what I could create and what I deserved. As I listened, a realization dawned. The greatest shifts in mindset often come when we allow uncertainty to become an ally rather than an enemy. Unlike the relentless grind for quick results or the tendency to hide from risk, Lorraine's approach embraced curiosity as a driving force. By approaching her pop-up project as an experiment, a question rather than a command, she opened herself to unexpected connections, learning from each misstep and celebrating every small win without clinging to a rigid timeline. The flexibility to pivot, try different recipes, and invite feedback fused her personal growth with her financial evolution. Yet, it wasn't simply improvisation that made her journey remarkable. Each morning, she would jot down what she appreciated. Even the smallest details, like the warmth of flour on her palms or a regular smile after tasting a new filling. This daily ritual acted as a compass, reminding her that progress was about more than numbers. It anchored her through setbacks, such as the rainstorm that drenched her stand one Saturday or the time her signature icing flopped, drawing playful ribbing from her regulars. Rather than spiraling into self-judgment, she used these moments to cultivate self-trust and adaptability, charting internal growth alongside external expansion. During our conversation, I caught myself reflecting on my own routines. The relentless pressure to match someone else's blueprint had left little room for gratitude or for seeing how far I'd already come. Inspired by Lorraine's practice, I bought a small notebook that afternoon and began documenting things I found rewarding, whether it was the aroma of fresh coffee, a spontaneous idea, or the feeling of real connection in a conversation. Over time, those entries shifted my focus from what was missing to what was flourishing. Simultaneously, I embraced a new visualization exercise each morning. Rather than obsessing over distant goals, I pictured the process, the effort, the learning, the community I hoped to build step by step. This simple mental rehearsal infused daily decisions with purpose, shifting effort from a state of anxiety to one of curiosity. Each visualization, paired with intentional gratitude, nudged my habits in subtle but powerful directions, aligning my actions with the kind of abundance I wanted to experience. On a brisk evening, with chill winds tugging at my coat, I ran into Lorraine again as she was packing up her stand. She handed me a misshapen donut, laughing off the imperfection, and said, "Sometimes growth looks like this, a little messy, but undeniably sweet." That night, savoring the odd shape and unexpected flavor, I recognized a new freedom blossoming in my own approach. Mindset and habits, I realized, are not fixed equations. They are living dialogues between who we are and who we are becoming, shaped by the risks we are willing to take and the gratitude we choose to claim each day. I realized the importance of true financial empowerment during an unexpected detour on a trip through the mountains. Exhausted and a little lost, I came across an old roadside market run by a woman named Mavis. Her hands were stained with berry juice, her laughter echoing around the timber beams. "Folks forget," she teased, "that making and keeping money's more art than arithmetic. You want it to last, you gotta know your own brushstrokes." While waiting for my phone to regain signal, I helped carry crates and restock jars. Observing her, I saw the difference between simply earning income and truly embodying abundance. She moved with a purpose that was unmistakably her own, not defined by comparison, but shaped by a deep trust in her skills and her worth. People came not just for Mavis's honey and preserves, but for her perspective, war stories from failed harvests, advice on patching roofs, gentle yet assertive nudges about raising your ask. "Don't trade your peace for pennies," she once admonished a customer haggling over $1. The lesson lingered like the scent of her wild plum jam. Embodying a prosperous identity, I've learned, is not a costume you put on to impress the crowd. It's cultivated with the quiet, cumulative confidence to say, "This is how I create value, and it matters." I recall the first time I consciously raised my rates as a consultant. My voice trembled. My palms were damp. All the old fears threatened to crush my conviction. But when the client responded with a calm nod and immediate acceptance, a surge of pride broke through the doubt. That moment marked a shift, self-perception and financial outcome separating from old insecurities and guilt. Furthermore, prosperity isn't achieved in a vacuum of ethics or purpose. My friend Javier comes to mind. He left a lucrative finance job for nonprofit work that called to his core beliefs. Eventually, the community he served put their trust and substantial resources into his hands. He grew into a steward, not just a recipient, of abundance. Javier's journey taught me that real power with money comes when your actions align with a vision greater than profit alone. When your values guide your choices, decisions become more sustainable and satisfying. Emerging into this identity, I find that the emotional landscape changes. No longer plagued by the relentless pressure to prove or justify my ambitions, I can choose both drive and integrity. When opportunities arise, instead of grasping out of lack, I reflect, does this invitation support the kind of wealth I want to cultivate? At a dinner with colleagues recently, I noticed myself listening for what energized me instead of what simply padded the bottom line. Authentic ease took root where anxiety once sprouted. Another crucial layer is recognizing that this empowered self does not live at the edge of constant vigilance. It's built on trust, trusting my experience, my ability to navigate setbacks, my sense of timing. Mavis, too, trusted that a bad crop didn't define her future. She adjusted, innovated, and always made room for new solutions. That ability, to weather storms without internalizing defeat, became a measure of prosperity far richer than any sales tally. Establishing this financial identity, I now see, seeds confidence in others as well. People feel it in your posture, your words, even your silences. Magnetism replaces persuasion. I'm approached for projects that match my principles because my boundaries are steady and clear. Javier and Mavis, in their very different ways, became centers of gravity for opportunity, drawing in reliability and loyalty. By embodying that same self-assurance, prosperity arrives as an invitation, never a chase. Ultimately, inhabiting this new way of being is a quiet revolution. Success driven not by external validation or frantic accumulation, but by a deliberate, ethical, and sustained commitment to creating and sharing genuine value. Just as those mountain valleys grow lush through seasons both harsh and gentle, I grow into abundance, purposeful, unwavering, and unmistakably my own. Reflecting on this journey so far, I find myself lingering in that quiet space where lessons echo without fanfare, a moment between heartbeats when the fog of old patterns dissolves and a hidden shoreline reveals itself. It feels a bit like reaching an unexpected clearing after twisting through a forest, senses sharpened by the unknown and the faint chill of uncertainty. The sunlight glancing off dewy grass tells me everything is different, even if the ground beneath my feet is the same one I started out on. Standing there, I'm keenly aware of how each moment, each choice, subtly weaves into the tapestry of this unfolding path. There's no single turning point, no fireworks to signal a shift. Instead, change arrives as a hush, a gentle, cumulative swell, like tide pulling steadily at the roots of old trees. In the quiet presence of that current, my inner dialogue grows clearer. I notice how resilience is forged not by big declarations, but by the soft, daily realignments of intention, by allowing discomfort to become a doorway. It dawns on me that true transformation rarely announces itself in grand gestures. It's discovered in the aftermath, etched in our responses when no one else is watching. As I move deeper into the narrative, I think about how ideas once held tightly in my grip, beliefs shaped by family lore or hurried ambition, begin to loosen. An unspoken permission takes root, allowing fresh perspectives to seep in, soaking the soil where old doubts used to live. I can sense an internal recalibration, a quiet negotiation between possibility and restraint. There's an understated power in that intersection, a draw that encourages me to let go of scripts inherited from past generations, replacing them with convictions chosen consciously. During quiet walks when city lights blur into gold and lavender, I revisit conversations with mentors, friends, and even strangers whose stories brush up against my own. Their words, shaped by experience and authenticity, become lanterns along the trail. In these moments, an understanding crystallizes. Growth is cultivated in the interplay of vulnerability and resolve, discovery and deliberation. There's an artistry to building something sustainable, a rhythm that can't be rushed, an elegance in steady focus. I sense, more than reason, a deepening trust in this unfolding process. Uncertainty no longer threatens to swallow me whole. It now signals fertile ground, the promise hidden in questioning what I've always assumed to be true. Each exchange, each learned intuition, enters the mix like a new color on a blank palette, transforming what I can imagine for myself and for those whose lives intersect with mine. We're drawn forward by more than hope, by a quiet confidence that our story is still being shaped, every step infusing character into the vision ahead. Inhaling the promise of dawn, feeling the weight of the questions that still linger, I sense the tug of anticipation, a gentle urgency beating just beneath the calm. There is more to be unearthed, a final truth that will draw together all the moments and meaning I've gathered along the way. As we move toward that horizon together, I invite you to pause here, let your breath settle, and gather the lessons carried on the wind. The next steps hold a quiet power, waiting for illumination, as if the last piece of a mosaic is about to snap into place, revealing a picture that finally makes sense. As dawn crept over the city, painting quiet streaks of light across my window, I found myself gazing out at the world with a sense of hard-earned clarity. The tapestry of lives I'd witnessed, ambitious, tender, broken, triumphant, wove together into something far richer and subtler than any single story. I recalled Mavis's laugh ringing out among the berry crates, Lorraine's flower-dusted hands scribbling gratitude in a notebook, and the unyielding gaze of my grandfather as he pinned warnings on faded pages. Their choices and regrets mingled with my own moments of fear and small victories, and I saw, with new eyes, how every fleeting gain or painful loss echoed a deeper longing for meaning that pulsed beneath our chase for fortune. All these lessons crystallized one morning as I wandered into a quiet corner of my favorite park, dew still glistening across the grass, air scented by new blooms. There, an old man played chess with a boy, their laughter winding between the trees. It struck me that wealth, true, sustaining wealth, grows not from maneuvering faster or outsmarting the crowd, but from moving through the world with purpose and listening to the quieter questions that often go unheard amid the noise of comparison and urgency. The old man's fingers, stained by time, moved each piece with deliberation, sometimes pausing so long that a breeze would nudge the board. In his pauses, I recognized something radical. Abundance flourishes in the spaces where we allow ourselves to be present, attentive, and honest about who we are becoming. I realized then I'd spent years seeking what already flickered within, an invitation to build prosperity not on hurried deals or borrowed blueprints, but by honoring my values in daily practice. Those moments of stillness, gratitude, and genuine connection became touchstones, marking a path forward where success is measured less by accumulation and more by the freedom to choose my own pace and shape legacy with intention. Even setbacks held value, teaching patience and resilience, making room for deeper joy and more meaningful contribution. As sunlight fully claimed the city, brushing warmth over the waking streets, I understood with certainty that the greatest asset I could cultivate was never in the number scrawled across an account, but in the steadiness with which I returned to my own principles, again and again, no matter how alluring the shortcut or how loud the drumbeat of expectation. That insight is not about denying ambition, but inviting it to serve something fertile, planted with care, and tended by courage. If you find yourself drawn to shortcuts, haunted by regret, or doubting your worth, I invite you. Pause and listen for those quiet signals pointing you home. Allow the echo of every misstep and every hard-earned win to guide your compass toward choices that honor who you truly wish to become. Our stories, yours and mine, are written in these daily decisions, in how we show up, in how we hold or release what the world offers us. Prosperity, I've discovered, is not a finish line, but a lifelong act of presence. And so, as I step forward into the day, I commit again to building wealth with an open heart, forging a legacy where every gain strengthens community, character, and the quiet hope that whispers, day after day, that I am free to choose abundance on my own terms.